Welcome back everybody, today we're jumping back to Warhammer 40k Spacemarine 2, but on ARC GPU. And as you can see, I was first starting to do my test with the i310 100F, but apparently this CPU is a bottleneck for this game and the CPU combo. So I redid my test with the non-bottleneck CPU and redid all my testing. Welcome to Response PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on! Quick disclaimer, all my system is a fresh Windows install, the game, the driver and the updates, and no junkware. Your result may vary whatever you have installed on your PC. So like I was saying, the i310 100F seems to be a bottleneck for this game. This is a 4-core 8-thread at 3.6 GHz. I was trying at 16 GB of memory, and all the ARC GPU was waiting for the CPU to respond. The CPU was at 100% utilization all the time. Then I tried my i3 12100F, which is also a 4-core 8-thread but at a 3.4 GHz, still at 16 GB of memory, and now the game was playable. Even the ARC A750 Elden Ring edition was playing well at 1080p medium settings. The CPU was not holding much at a 70 to 80% of utilization, and with 16 GB of memory I'm using 15.1, so it seems to be the system memory can be a bottleneck also in this game. I also decided to go back to the i7 from my video of the proposed minimum requirement, because that CPU was doing well, and for some reason I have a motherboard that supports Re-sizable bar with that CPU. Starting off with the A310, and to have a decent gameplay you need to drop the resolution to 720p. At 1080p it's playable-ish, but we under the 30 FPS and the 24-25. As for the 720p, we are at 33 FPS average. The GPU is pegged at 100% and the CPU is in the mid 60 to 70. For the system memory we are at 14.7 out of 16. Really memory hungry. Then send setup, but with the A380, but this time also at 1080p instead of 720p. The card gave us an average of exactly 30 FPS, sometimes 2-3 FPS under, sometimes 2-3 FPS over 30, with the GPU pegged at 100% and the CPU in the mid 60s, with 14 GB of memory utilization. This is the perfect match, I would say. This is exactly what is supposed to be a proposed minimum requirement, 30 FPS 1080p. I guess we already found our real minimum requirement for the Intel side of things. And for the A580, we now have 8 GB of VRAM. Playing at 1080p low settings, we get an average of 39 FPS. Highly playable. You can even play with some settings to have a better visual and still be over 30 FPS. The GPU is at 98% of utilization. CPU still have some CPU power left, and we're using 13.9 GB of system memory. But just to make sure I'm not any bottleneck anything, I'm going to test everything again on my editing rig. That means I'll be testing on the i7 14700K and 32 GB of memory. Then back to the A380, but with the i7 14 Gen and 32 GB of memory. The GPU is pegged at 100%. At 1080p we get 34 FPS. We gain 4 FPS from the i7 8700. It is in the margin of error, but now we are sure that the CPU and memory is not the bottleneck for the card. Having the card pegged at 99%, the CPU is only at 22, and we're using 17.1 GB of memory. That game is really system memory hungry, and I'm only at 1080p low settings. Then the A580, if you remember with the i7 8700, we get 39 FPS with medium settings at 1080p. Now, by trying to remove any kind of bottleneck, we get an average of 55 FPS. The GPU is pegged most of the time. We are using 17.5 GB of memory, and the CPU is only at 35 to 40% of utilization. So we had some kind of system memory bottleneck when we were using 16 GB with the i7 8700. This Intel ARC A580 keeps surprising me every time I'm testing that card. Now the A750 Elden Ring edition, I was able to crank the settings to high at 1080p and still get a 65 FPS average. I didn't try, but you probably can play at 1440p medium settings, but I like the fact that we are at high settings and we are over 60 FPS. Yes, this is only the campaign, but if you want to play a co-op, multiplayer or whatever, at least you know you can reach over 60 FPS with the high candy of high settings. The CPU still have some leeway, and for the memory we are at 17.5, so I guess the proposed minimum requirement of 8 is a bit low. I would say 16 would be a better minimum requirement, requirement, and if you can have a little bit more, that will be perfect to stop any kind of bottleneck to the CPU. And the last GPU, the A770 LE edition, limited edition. Anyway, at 1440p medium settings, I get an average of 51 FPS. Don't mind the MSI Afterburner that's showing higher FPSs because I'm inside some kind of base, but when you're out with high density enemy, your FPS will drop. I'm playing that footage because I forgot to unmute my system, so I have no audio when I'm playing outside against all the enemy. So the card can easily play at 1440p medium settings, and we are using 6.8 GB of VRAM for the GPU, and the GPU is big at 99% of utilization. I mean, the 750 also going to give you a similar results because have the similar VRAM and similar clock. For the CPU, we are in the 20 to 30% of utilization, and for the system memory, the RAM, we are at 18 to 18.1 GB of utilization. This game is really hungry for memory and quite demanding for a CPU. If you have less than a 4-core 8 thread, I'll say it's a no-go, and even some 4-core 8 thread, they have a hard time to play it. But you'll see in my next video, which will be the real minimum requirement, how low CPU you can go and GPU. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.